Targa Tasmania. Unfortunately, the event has been cancelled for some pretty dire reasons, but nevertheless, we're going to get a chance to have a look here at the Ultima RS, the Tarmac Rally Edition. Racetrack. Recently and has a few pretty important upgrades that make it more capable as a proper race car over the standard item. Not that the standard item is sort of anything that's too wanting, but this thing is pretty special. We've got the Bosch Motorsport guys here. Uber's done a lot of design and development and tuning of this car to bring it up to spec and make it competitive. And we've got Mike and Gary here who drive and navigate the car. So we're going to start to open up to the clam here and have a good look at things, and they're going to run you over some of the key differences that they've sort of made on this car to improve it. So yeah, I guess let's open this thing up, guys.
So here you go. Inside here first.
Yeah.
So I guess the major difference over a factory car really is the roll cage. So the roll cage is built by Ultima, but it's up spec to a homologated version. You can see it's got double cross members, and it's all the same shape as a normal Ultima, so that's all good. Everything still fits. Then we go to the suspension components, I suppose.
And some of that, just on this case, Mike, it was the FIA certification required you guys to basically run through a whole thing in terms of doing some finite element analysis to prove that this car was safe, but also upgraded and suitable for competition.
That's right. So it's had all its finite element analysis work. We've added various gussets in places, cross members through the side impact areas, and that's passed all its FIA analysis quite well.
Because I know mine's quite like, having worked on it, even jacking it up, you can tell that the chassis is quite stiff to start with. But,
that's right.
But I guess what that's been is, an evolution from when they had the GTR and they brought it up to I guess the current iteration of it. They've made incremental improvements, but doing that finite element and I guess running it through the certification process has validated a lot of that sort of trial and error type of development, which is really good. And I mean, obviously, it's kind of proved the merit of this chassis, I guess, historically in terms of the way that it was screwed together.
The initial FIA analysis of the standard chassis it passes the test anyway.
Yeah.
But the gusseting and the side impact just adds to that certification process. So it is good out of the factory, but just didn't pass the test. It's not made of that steel that they needed to be drawn on.
Yeah,
so.
And certainly if you're using it in the way that you guys use it, it's probably pretty bloody important to make sure that stuff's squared away.
Yeah.
And maybe do we want to start at the back and then we can just move forward? So.
Alright.
Now the running gear in this is it's an LT based motor.
LT based
from
motor,
K-Tech in the US. They do a lot of their GT production motors, don't they? So they're a pretty tried and true, I guess, manufacturer of engines or builder of engine now. They do I think the C8R in the US, don't they, for the Daytona 24?
No, they did the C6R.
Yeah.
So they were engine manufacturer for Chevy Racing.
Yeah.
With the actual pro race team. And then for the C7R, they were helping, but they're not building it right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And then currently they do LMP3 engines,
There you
Nissan
go.
engines, and what's the other one? Trans Am.
So it's fair to say that these guys are not giving it a crack for their first time. They've got some Ks under their belt and they know what they're doing. And this is a Hollinger sequential box, which is an Australian company, Hollinger, and it's an air shift, paddle shift gearbox. You'll see, we'll actually throw in some in-car and you'll see like how wild this thing is and how quick those shifts are. And a lot of that I think comes down to the electronic system, isn't that right, Uber? And there's been a lot of tuning development that's gone into that to make that work properly in terms of traction control and the way that it delivers its power and puts it to the road. Yeah.
Yeah.
What sort of shift time have we got, Uber?
That's 80 milliseconds.
80 milliseconds.
80 milliseconds.
80 milliseconds. Yeah.
All right. Now, so I guess tell us a bit more about that electronics package and what makes it so good.
Yeah. So when Mike approached me about the engine choice, I didn't know the Ultima itself. So Ultima gives you the option to use LS engines or LT engines, but they pretty much give you the crate engine option from Chevy Performance. where you can choose LT, LT1, LT4, LT5, but it always comes with a Chevy Performance control pack.
Yep.
And that's pretty much just a C7 ECU from the street, where you take all the street stuff out and you run the engine, but that's it. There's no traction control, there's no ABS, there's no seat shifting, because they're used, the only thing they can support is manual transmissions.
Yep.
And because this car was meant to be going actual competitive racing, we needed those features, and that's when we started talking.
Yeah, because seeing this thing on the street, like, it puts the power down just so well, and it's almost uncharacteristic of what you would see with like Group C cars of the era. They were always like quite wild, and they always had a huge amount of attitude on them. And I guess from your experience racing, that's usually means they're wasting a lot of that horsepower.
Yeah.
Whereas this thing it's so fast, like the way that it puts its power down, and I think that's, that it certainly demonstrates the amount of development that's happened probably in the last 30 years, I guess, since that era was around.
That car's very, very special. LS7 engine on board, that about 800 horsepower, weighs about 900 kilograms.
That's on there right now is an actual professional motorsport ECU. It's a whole standalone ECU from Bosch Motorsport.
Yeah.
It was developed for Le Mans cars, and I was working with K-Tech already on the pack, on the controls for the LT family, and then there was a little effort needed to adapt it to this chassis, to the Hollinger transmission. So the transmission control, the actual air shifting,
Yep.
reading the pedals from the steering wheel, and then firing the solenoids that actually do the shifting. That's all part of this control pack. And then we also added a Bosch Motorsport ABS M5 system, where Ashley is helping with. So he's Bosch Motorsport rep here for Australia.
Yes, this is Ashley. He's the man to chat to if you need a Bosch Motorsport system. Hit him up and he'll give you the rundown on especially how you can put it into a variety of different cars. So I mean, it's great to have that in the Ultima, and this is obviously the best platform to validate a system like this, because I guess it's the most extreme end of things. But I know, Ashley, you've been chatting to a lot of people here this weekend, and certainly in this type of motorsport, which is in a variety of conditions, in a variety of cars, and certainly you want to be able to have something that's quite drivable with a good margin for error. That's where everyone here is almost, I think they've been chewing your ear off non-stop all weekend. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, we've had a number of competitors here that are running the product, and we've had excellent feedback just from the control standpoint that they get with the cornering and the braking points coming into sort of slippery corners. I know Mike's commented a few times that it's been super handy on some of the tricky stages.
Yeah, I know we'd all like to think that we're infallible and don't actually make any errors under braking or accelerating, but I think if you look at anyone or chat to anyone that's running in racing currently, these systems are just so consistent, and if you want to be at the front, they're really a mandatory thing now, you'd have to say. I don't know, Mike, you had a bit of trouble like everyone who owns an Ultima does, just keeping heat out of this thing, so you can see it's been put to good use, that's why it's dirty, but also there's a whole heap of work that you've done in terms of heat insulation and just cooling on this thing, which probably is going to, I guess, give us a good segue into looking at the front of the car. So we might just pop the front clamp here and start to have a look at some upgrades that you've made on the front. Now the shocks and suspension in this car have been modified. So Mike, give us a rundown on what you did here and why you made those changes.
Our suspension engineer Rick from RT Engineering, he was pretty comfortable that these Penske race shocks would do the job. They're three-way. We've got altered travel, and to maximise tarmac grip in a race car, you need to have quite a lot of travel, and so this package extends the travel in an Ultima by a fair margin, and means it just soaks up all those bumps and nasty compressions.
And that's certainly something that's always a bit of a drawback with, I guess, dedicated track cars versus something that actually has to work on a road that has a degree of undulation, and you need some actual wheel travel, so you're not bottoming things out, and so that you've got controllability, I guess, at the limit. Once a shock's completely compressed and the spring's completely compressed, you're going to run into issues because there's no more suspension trouble, and it's just going to shock load the suspension and usually makes it either understeer or oversteer in a pretty uncontrollable manner. So I think that's a huge improvement, something that I'm particularly jealous of on this car for certain. This is the worst part. I'll keep saying to Mike, like he's the one who's really doing some proper R&D and like real world testing on this, and it's going to empty my bank account pretty quickly, but it's the right way to do it, I think. So, and cooling wise, you've gone to an upgraded radiator, and you've actually mounted your oil cooler up the front here, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. With the new L2 series motors, the exhaust headers go out over the fuel tanks, and that was heating up the traditional oil cooling position, where we had the oil cooler originally.
Because they're normally in the side pods.
That's right. Yeah, they're normally sitting in the side pods where the AC sits on our side on the right, and on the left is usually the oil cooler.
Yep.
And but we found it was acting like an all heater, not an oil cooler. So
yeah, because you've got those nice big headers, but obviously the proximity of that to your oil system, and particularly your dry sump tank is.
That's right. Very close.
Packaging's always difficult. There's almost there's no new way of, I guess, mounting some of that stuff. It is sort of where it is to some extent. So I guess moving this stuff up the front here is pretty good. So
the oil cooler is quite big, as you can see, and the radiator's a large unit as well. And that's a unit CAD designed through PWR, radiator company in Australia that build the Mark Car series race cooling systems and things, so they're very experienced.
Yeah, and that's right. I think Ryan McLeod's a guy, I think he's just sold racer industry, or he's just sold Mark cars, I can't remember. Anyway, Ryan McLeod's a guy who developed Mark cars. PWR being an Australian company in Queensland, they have a number of CNC machines running flat stick, punching out these oil coolers and radiators, because they're I think becoming sort of renowned as some of the best products in the world. And certainly in this application, to be able to fit something in the hole that we don't have a lot of space left over with is pretty good. I mean, we can see here you've had to clearance a little bit. These are brushless high volume fans, also provided by PWR, I think.
That's right, yeah. So they increased the CFM by probably 4 times, I think, and certainly required in what we're doing. The heat generator running a stage is very significant.
Yeah. All right, Mike. So the braking setup in this is the factory upgraded setup. I think they're 380mm rotors, front and rear, AP racing,
something like that.
Big dogs. They're the standard factory setup.
That's right, yeah.
But I know a lot of people in these cars, they do complain about brake feel. They think that potentially the pedal pressures are too high. Tell us about what changes you've made. I guess it can only be pads. But other than that, how you found it.
So look, when we heard the complaints that other people have made, or the discussion around pedal pressure, we did some of our own research with the sort of pedal pressures we'd be expecting to use in this sort of event. And to Ultima's credit, it's bang on what you'd expect in a race car, to be honest. And all we've done really is take a really high coefficient pad, which is just a couple of steps up from what Ultima give in the factory, same brand and
I think
everything.
the standard one's a Frodo DS2500.
That's right, yeah. And we've gone to a Frodo. I can't remember.
I think it's the one above the DS3000.
That's right.
I can never
it's the
remember
one
this
or
stuff
something like
either.
that. I can't quite remember. But it's we just threw it in there to see what it's like, and that increased coefficient's fantastic. Its braking ability is sensational. The brake pedal feels terrific.
How do you find it from cold?
Perfect, no problem.
And I didn't notice any noise from this thing.
No noise at all. And that in combination with the M5 ABS is outrageously good.
Yeah.
So it is by far and away the best braking car that I've driven.
Because
better than the Porsche, better.
Well, that's it. You were on a Porsche GT3 prior to
right.
this, and then a Viper ATR before that. So it's not like you haven't had the opportunity to, I guess, try a few different cars.
Yeah.
And I suppose one thing, when you study engineering, they always give you some metrics, I guess, to look at in terms of what would be reasonable, like, I guess, leg efforts and arm effort for repetitive type of situations. We've got a rotary going out over there, but sorry, hopefully you can still hear us. And I think here you would say that's well within the limits. But that, I mean, with this event, we do over 2,000 kilometres, so it's not like you're sitting in the car for 5 minutes. Particularly something you would see like Le Mans type applications for vehicles. They do talk about driver fatigue and that sort of thing, and that's if you're finding it reasonable at this sort of distance, it's a pretty good validation situation. So outside of that, you've gone away from unassisted steering as well, and you've got an electronic power steering.
That's right. So initially we started with we built the car with no power assistance at all.
Yep.
And I felt that the low speed disadvantage of that, just parking, that sort of thing, wasn't going to be that big a deal for us because one of the
I was on the same page. I mean, I thought everyone was just being a big sissy in terms of just the steering weight. And unfortunately, you've got a reasonable build to you as well. So when you were telling me at Targa High Country that you were having to put in like a great deal of, more so than arm effort, but actually engage the rest of your body to get direction changes on the steering, you thought it was really a mandatory thing for this car?
Given we're in a tarmac event, so we did High Country in Victoria on Mount Buller, and that lasted 3 days, that event.
Yep.
And a lot of high-speed cornering, and not just on a track where you've got one high-speed corner. It's multiple, some of those stages are going 20 minutes and sort of thing, where you're cornering hundreds and hundreds of times. And I felt that that became it was quite a demanding thing to do. So,
to give some context to that, I mean, Mount Arrowsmith is a tarmac rally station that's over 50 kilometres in length, so you're talking about a really long time to be out the limit. I know after even on day 2 of Targa here, we had I think a 25 click stage, and having been out of my car for a while, I sort of finished that and I was like, I felt a bit drained. I was like, I was a bit out of condition for this sort of stuff. So it is something that's pretty important. Now this is it's a DC micro steer, is it?
That's right, DC micro steer. So luckily one of the other Ultima owners, Toby Thomas up in Sydney, he helped us out a lot. He was in the process of building it, and he put one of those in.
Yep.
And he took the fabrication side of that, where it needed to sit and all that type of thing. Being an engineer, he's a mechanical engineer as well.
Yep.
So that was very fortunate that he came on board and helped out massively. So thanks, Toby.
Yeah, and you said that bolted up like, it was a neat install, but also you didn't even have to pull the center the center section off the car.
No, all we had to do was pull the seat out to get in, obviously, but none of the components in the dash needed to come out. So for any Ultima owners out there that want to put in one of these electric steer, have a chat to Toby, or we'll put up Toby's already put some how-tos on his YouTube or on the Ultima owner site, so you can look at that. But we'll certainly throw a bit more out there. But in terms of what does it feel like, it feels fantastic. It drives just like, and I've got to say, the steering feel and effort feels just like my GT RS did, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that that's not a car that was left wanting in that regard.
No, exactly.
We'll talk about them in
steering
pretty
feels
high regard.
fantastic, yeah.
That's great.
Perfect.
So Mike, one of the major changes that you made with this is to go away from a traditional Porsche gearbox and run with the Hollinger, and I think one of the things that probably worked really well in that respect is the packaging pretty much the same as a standard Porsche gearbox.
This particular gearbox from Hollinger is built to be the same size as the original Porsche box.
Because this isn't the first one that Hollinger's done with to replace a Porsche gearbox, is it?
No, this is straight. This is the big brother of the gearbox that would go into a Porsche Cup car for endurance racing, 24 hour Le Mans.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I guess everyone in Europe's knows about, you know, Nürburgring 24 hours and those sorts of cars that are running, and obviously that would be an application that this Hollinger box would work well for. I know in Ultimates there's been other sequential boxes that people have fitted, and I think it's required them to tilt the engine, which wasn't something that was attractive to you guys because of the, I guess, the implications, you know, at the front of the engine and everywhere else.
And there's no adapters. The bell housing fits straight onto the motor. It's all very neat and easy to get in and out. And you know, Hollinger have a fantastic reputation from around the world racing, and so we went with that without any hesitation at all.
And you're pretty lucky in that respect. I mean, A, them being local to Australia, they're just in Melbourne, aren't they?
They're just in Melbourne. Yeah.
But you did a tour of their factory. I'd love to do it myself, actually. And you were saying that that the guys are actually really good blokes.
Yes.
But they're, you know, they love what they do.
Yeah.
And the tech they've got there is, yeah, like, I mean, I guess industry leading, which is why.
Absolutely. And the steel they use is out of Germany, and very high quality bits of gear, right down to every part of their process is top notch. So I was very impressed.
No, that's great. And look, you know, I guess that's something that's pretty important. If you want a gearbox and you're going to turn up to events like this, there is a heavy investment to get here, and certainly to run a car like this. So you want to make sure that you're not going to have any issues with reliability, you know, or sort of any breakages. And if you do need to service it, you want to make sure that you've got good support and the ability to find a place for parts. And that's okay. So yeah, Uwe, we were talking about the Hollinger box there, and obviously it's great in terms of the hardware, but obviously we need to run that thing and make sure that it's going to be doing what it needs to do when Mike tells it to upshift or downshift. And I heard you just mentioning that one thing that can happen occasionally for certain drivers is they might actually grab a downshift when they're not meant to. And you've done some things that obviously will help with that, particularly in terms of saving a hell of a lot of money and not ruining a week or weekend.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so this whole decision of going to step to sequential transmission, when we decided on the control pack that we did, the Bosch Motorsport, so that ECU actually controls the shifting, and it's like drive-by-wire. It's like the new throttle bodies where you can press the pedal, but the throttle does not necessarily move. And it's the same in here. So when Mike pulls his pedal, it doesn't just shift. It goes through some math and it looks, what's the RPM now? Does he want to downshift or upshift?
Yep.
And does it really make sense to shift now? So it can actually help him out a little bit when he's a little nervous and excited and he wants to downshift really quick, and it would actually over-rev. The computer won't let him do it, and that's why he doesn't blow.
That is actually something that's interesting. People think that a rev limiter will stop an engine over, like, you know, exceeding a certain RPM limit, but that's not actually the case. If you put it into second at 150 and let the clutch out, you're going to buzz the engine and throw some rods through blocks or do some horrible damage.
Yes.
So that's something where that electronics packaging is really foolproofing. I mean, that's, you know, talking about drive-by-wire, that's something which I've had to battle with just with running ITBs on my car, is obviously in terms of tunability. Traditionally, individual throttle bodies, say on, I don't care, you know, 60s Cobra race cars and stuff like that, they're always said to be particularly, you know, a pig to drive at any sort of low-speed stuff, and that's because you didn't have that degree of control with, I guess, butterfly openings being relevant to actually your throttle pedal travel.
Right.
So what we're doing is, I guess, extending that analogy a whole other step forward into making things safe. And, you know, there's not a small investment in getting gearboxes that will stand up to proper race conditions. So you don't want to be going through and having to, A, fix things, or B, I guess, have to repair them when you're at a circuit. And it's not like everyone wants to carry around a gearbox just as a backup. You know, I mean, that's certainly something I don't think most people, even people who buy these cars, like, want to be doing, because you can't carry those spares on hand. You know, you're not an LMP race team, and even some of those guys would certainly see that as a significant cost.
No, it protects your investment.
Yeah, that's it, right? And it is a huge investment.
fly-by-wire as well.
Yeah.
It's not ITBs, but it's a single throttle body.
Yep.
So what we just yesterday did while testing, with this control pack, he has a couple of switches.
Yep.
Map switches where you can change power levels and whatnot. And we were literally just tuning the input of the throttle body for wet conditions.
Yeah.
So Mike was saying, okay, the way it comes right now, it's a little harsh to modulate the throttle. Can you not dumb that down? And that's the last thing we did last night, that I developed another map position that reacts a little easier, so that he has more feel in tricky conditions. And that also helps not experienced drivers to get along with the new power that they have right now and manage it in non-optimal conditions.
And that's so important with events like this as well, because of the variety of conditions, and particularly when it's wet. Having a car that's approachable is so important to you being able to drive the car up to the limit. If it's super snappy and an absolute handful at the limit, then you're never going to want to go close to it. So you'll find that wherever you're driving, you're only driving at 7/10. You don't even want to go close to 10/10 because it's an absolute
because it's scary.
Yeah. And anyone who says it's not is just lying, I can tell you right now. And anyone who's ever watched sort of Group C cars, which I guess were where these things were developed, I don't think that you would ever criticise any of those guys not having some big balls, would be fair to say. So, no, that's great stuff. I like that. I could probably sell that. You reckon? Sell this some of Gary's.
Squeeze it out.
Original sweat from stage
There'll be some old
2 to
ladies
4.
who'll tell them we've got some of Gary's underwear. I reckon that might work all right. All right, we're going to fire this thing up.
Okay, so we've got some missionary here. And this is the nice bits in here, so we've still got a rally safe. That's part of the requirements for running a Tarmac event. That comes, that's a GPS based tracking system.
Really good stuff. So if you crash, it'll actually call a medical intervention vehicle without you having to do anything. So this is bloody great technology. They actually run this in WRC now. Is it an Australian product?
It is indeed, Tasmanian.
The Australians, we pretty much, well, Tasmanians in particular, we can do no wrong. We're probably the best on the planet at everything. All right, let's fire this thing up and see how it sounds, Mike. I think that's just a bit, obviously we could probably go on for hours and hours running over all of the changes that Mike's made on this car to make it suitable for racing. Certainly you can have a chat to Ultima and ask them specifically about the Tarmac edition, which will give you a good idea of some of the upgrades that are required. And otherwise, have a chat to Uber or have a chat to Ashley about the Bosch Motorsports stuff. And they'll be more than happy to help you out. And I think if you are going to use these cars for, I guess a degree of racing or use them really seriously, it's something to properly consider, even in part way, to get it to spec. So otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks Mike, thanks Gary, thanks Uber, thanks Ashley, thanks Adam. Service crew, most important entities of any of this Targa stuff. So thanks very much.